Hello everybody, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Future Zoologist Academy. Today we'll be discussing an adorable little animal who lives in one of the hottest, driest environments in the entire world. And this animal also happens to be the smallest species of canine. Today we're learning all about fennec foxes. Let's get into it. Fennec foxes are one of 12 species of true foxes. And like all foxes, they are canines. They're a member of the dog family. Fennec foxes mainly live in the Sahara Desert, in the northern part of Africa, and in some of the surrounding desert ecosystems. They have all sorts of adaptations that help them to survive in these very hot, dry environments, and we're going to focus quite a lot on those today. Before we get into the fennec fox's physical adaptations, there is an important word that we need to introduce: thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is the process of an animal regulating or controlling its body temperature. In other words, it's how they warm up or cool down. And many animals have physical adaptations, things on or in their body, or behaviors that help them to thermoregulate. One of the adaptations that helps fennec foxes to stay cool in the desert is actually their small size. Fennec foxes, like we said before, are the smallest species of canine in the entire world. Males are slightly larger than females, and they come in at a whopping 3 to 4 pounds. Which is about 1/3 the weight of an average house cat. Being small can be very helpful in the desert because the smaller you are, the easier it is for heat to escape from your body, which is going to help keep you cool. Now, all over the fennec fox's tiny little body, they have fur that is usually tan or light brown in color. And this actually benefits fennec foxes in more than one way. The first way that this benefits fennec foxes is it helps them to camouflage or blend into their environment, which, remember, is the desert. It's brown, so being brown helps them to blend in. This allows fennec foxes to stay better hidden from predators, things like owls and jackals and striped hyenas, but it's also going to help them when they're ambushing or sneak attacking their prey. Speaking of prey, let's talk for a moment about a fennec fox's diet. Fennec foxes are omnivores, meaning they eat both meat and plants, and that's very typical for foxes. The main food item for fennec foxes are going to be lots of different types of insects, but there are other animals they eat too. They eat rodents and lizards, they eat birds and eggs. But remember, because they're omnivores, they also eat plant matter too, including things like fruits and leaves. Because fennec foxes live in an environment where there's not very much water, they rely very heavily on the moisture, the water that's inside of their food, in order to stay hydrated. Now, we did say that light-colored fur actually has more than one job. That light-colored fur also helps fennec foxes to stay cool because light colors reflect sunlight and heat. If fennec foxes were dark in color, sunlight and heat would be absorbed into their fur and it would cause them to become very, very warm. Whereas light colors do a much better job reflecting sunlight and heat, and that helps to keep fennec foxes nice and cool. But the list of adaptations that fennec foxes use to thermoregulate continues. They actually also use their gigantic ears to help them stay cool as well. And this might make you go, huh, because aren't ears usually used for hearing? And of course they are. Because fennec foxes have huge ears, they also have a fantastic sense of hearing, which allows them both to keep an ear out for predators, but it also helps them to find prey that's scurrying around under the ground. Large ears also offer a great place for heat to escape from an animal's body. And for us to understand this, we need to talk for just a moment about blood. Because all animals, for the most part, have blood flowing around in their body. We can even see some of the blood that flows through our body where our skin is very thin, like in our wrists and our elbows. But we have blood that flows all the way up into our head and our ears the same way that fennec foxes do. When blood flows up into a fennec fox's ears, the skin is very thin. It allows heat to escape from their blood, and it sends cooler blood back to the rest of their body and lowers their core body temperature. We also lose heat from our ears. That's why in the winter we wear hats or earmuffs to cover our ears to help trap heat inside. Having large ears is a great adaptation for animals who live in very hot places because they allow heat to escape and help to cool them down. Whereas animals who live in a cold environment, like, I don't know, an Arctic fox, they want to have much smaller ears because that means that less heat can escape. They're trapping heat inside of their body, and that's actually going to help to keep them warm. Fennec foxes do really have adaptations all the way from their head to the very tips of their toes to help them survive in these really extreme environments. Fennec foxes have very thick fur on their paw pads underneath their feet, so that way when they're walking around on that hot desert sand, they're not burning their toes. Though I will say, the middle of the day, the hottest time of the day, is absolutely not a fennec fox's favorite time to venture out. Let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about some of the behaviors that fennec foxes do that help them to survive in extreme deserts. As we just said, fennec foxes do typically avoid the hottest times of the day. They're actually nocturnal, so they're most active at nighttime when temperatures in the desert are a little bit cooler. If they do have to venture out during the daytime, they rely on their light-colored fur to reflect heat, like we talked about before, but they also do quite a lot of panting, which is very rapid breathing, which expels heat from an animal's body and helps to cool them down. When resting, fennec foxes breathe about 23 times per minute, but when panting, that can go all the way up to nearly 700 breaths per minute. When they can, fennec foxes typically try to avoid those very hot times of the day by staying sheltered underground in burrows. Fennec foxes typically dig their burrows at the base of sand dunes because that's where moisture pools up. And when the sand is a little bit damp, it's much easier for them to dig these stable burrow systems. In these areas, their burrows can be quite long. They've been recorded being about 30 feet in length, which is almost as long as a school bus, and they're typically just a couple feet beneath the surface of the earth. In some of these places, the burrows can be quite complex with several different entrances and exits and occasionally connecting to other burrows of their family members. If they do dig a burrow somewhere where the sand's a little bit softer, they're not usually quite as complex and they usually just have one entrance and exit. Fennec foxes do usually live in small to medium-sized family groups with at most up to about 10 foxes. And the groups usually consist of a breeding pair and their offspring, sometimes from several litters of offspring. Fennec foxes are monogamous, meaning they only have one mate per breeding season, though they do usually take this a little further, and fennec foxes do often mate for life. They only mate typically once a year, and they can have anywhere from 1 to 4 offspring at a time, which are usually called pups or kits. Male fennec foxes do typically become very protective of females and their offspring after they're born during the breeding season. He'll defend the area, and he also spends quite a bit of time bringing food to the female because during that time she's doing something very important. She's producing milk. Fennec fox pups rely on their mother's milk for about the first 2 or so months of their life, and they don't start becoming a little bit more independent until they're about 4 months old. At that time, they start venturing off on their own, doing a little bit of hunting, acting a little bit more independently. Fennec foxes can live to be about 10 years old in the wild and can live even longer in captivity, up to about 14 years. Living in such a harsh, extreme desert ecosystem where there are predators lurking around already creates all sorts of challenges to survival, but they do face even a couple more from people. Now, fortunately, Fennec foxes are not threatened with extinction, yay! But they do face some threats, including habitat loss and collection for the pet trade, the exotic pet trade. It is illegal for people to go take Fennec foxes from the wild and sell them as pets, but it does still happen. One way that you can help Fennec foxes and lots of other wild animals is by not supporting the exotic pet trade. Don't get an exotic pet, and if you do, make sure it's an animal who was born in captivity and that their parents or grandparents were not taken from the wild. We also want to avoid supporting organizations that are exploiting wild animals or selling wild animals illegally to help stop the sale of them in the future. All right, you guys, well, that is all I had for us today for our adorable Fennec fox class. If you'd like to learn even more, do quizzes, activities, projects, please be sure to visit that link below, and I can't wait to see you at our next lesson. Thank you very much.